This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast coming at you Wednesday morning. It's October 10th. I got Britt Robson from MinnPost here with me today to preview the Wolves wings position. Last week, Britt and I did a preview of the bigs. We had on Cat, Rudy, Naz Reid, Luka Garza, Leonard Miller. So if you want some more specific talk on any of those guys, go back a week in the feed to listen to that. Today we're doing, again, the wings, which I have made the executive decision of choosing. These are the 6 wings on the Wolves. Jaden McDaniels, Kyle Anderson, Troy Brown Jr., Josh Minott, Matt Ryan, and Jaylen Clark. But we'll get into the wings, and I'm sure we'll kind of sprinkle some talk about the 2 preseason games in there over the course of the episode, because you and I haven't talked on the show since then. The only Brit take I have on Timberwolves preseason basketball is this tweet here. We are in the Trevor Keels portion of the game without putting too much stock into early October preseason. All the aspects Wolves fans would like to see: Cat and Rudy synergy, rugged and versatile wing play, etc. We're pretty well checked off on this trip. Britt, that's a positive review of the Abu Dhabi Wolves.
Well, I mean, you
what
don't
can you
know,
say, right? It's been good.
You don't know whether it's the Mavericks or the Wolves or both. You know, I mean, the Mavericks started 2 rookies. And
it's at least both, man. Dallas was bad too. I think the Wolves were good.
I mean, Dallas clearly didn't know what to do on defense for the first half of the first quarter. I mean, you know, they just literally did not know, and it was 19-3 before anybody could blink. But that said, you know, I mean,
I think they put a game plan together for like who everyone was going to guard if Ant played, and then Ant got rolled out, and they were like, whatever,
that's
just do the same thing.
Yeah, and plus they are rookies, and you know, and it's and Luka doesn't play great defense, and Luka, I think, was having trouble figuring out, or other people are having trouble figuring out how to play with Luka, because he is an acquired taste if you're going to be a sidekick for him. He does certain things. Anyway, what I enjoyed about Abu Dhabi, first of all, I mean, the most obvious thing is Cat looks fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he just looks like you wonder whether that sullen press conference was a harbinger for something good or something bad. Right. It was a harbinger for something good. He clearly wants to let his play do the talking, play within himself, give up the ball, make quick decisions. I mean, all the things you want to see out of Cat. And again, you know, it's 2 preseason games at the beginning of October, so all bets are off in terms of whether or not this is a sustainable upward trajectory. But anybody who saw Cat play in those 2 games said if he can play like this on a continuous basis, you just might as well tack on 3 or 4 wins to the Wolves win total, because on defense also, he and Rudy were doing a really good job of switching, you know, perimeter and paint. And, you know, there were a couple plays, obviously, inevitably, where, you know, there were breakdowns, and Cat was contesting decently.
Don't you think there were more breakdowns on the defensive side? I feel like I'm on.
Many more breakdowns on the defensive side. But I mean, at the same time,
I thought the offense was great, and I thought the defense was like okay, but like
some
not
of that
just for Cat, but for the whole team. And I feel like both have been equally praised, and I think that does a disservice to how good the offense was.
Oh yeah, I would agree with that, but I would also say that there were, with Luka, certainly in game 1. Game 2, the defense was a little hinkier, and part of that was Ant was on the floor. But I really do think that Luka was a one-man show and fairly unstoppable in the first game when he wanted to be, you know.
He had 25 points in the first half, guarded by Jaden McDaniels, yeah.
Exactly. And McDaniels a few times did a great job on him. But I think that's one of the things. When you have such a ball-dominant and great player, it's hard to play team defense because you don't really know what to do, especially if it's your first preseason game. So I'd give him a little bit of a mulligan on team defense. I remain impressed with Nickeil Alexander-Walker's defense, and Jaden is going to be Jaden, I think. I do. I was impressed, though, with not so much the execution, but the spacing of Cat and Rudy on defense. I thought they interchanged. Both came out, both dropped, both, Cat did more rotating, obviously, but both were all over the court, as it were.
Sure.
And that's what I want to see. I don't want to see traditional big down, others up. And yet I know that that's the best way for them to play. So they need a hybrid of that.
Yeah, diversity of coverage.
And I think the hybrid, we saw enough of the hybrid, not so much, again, the execution, but the idea of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Dallas. Rudy told me before they left, in the last press conference before they left, that they weren't preparing for Dallas per se, but you can't help but think that Rudy's probably not going to be up that much against almost any other team, and he was up a lot. He dropped well, I thought, relatively. I think where they got in trouble usually was in both semi-transition and when they got to the middle of the floor. I don't think the team knows how to play the middle of the floor yet in terms of from arc to rim. Attacking straight up the gut confuses their assignments. I mean, that's what I saw anyway.
Yeah, and that was leading to a handful. Like if you expose the middle of the floor and it's in pick and roll, it's going to lead to some of the lobs, and exactly. That's what was happening. Well, talk about defense, and again, let's sprinkle in some preseason talk through all of this. But Jaden McDaniels, let's start there.
Okay,
with the wings, he only played in one of the two preseason games. I don't have much of a swing one way or the other on what I thought or think about Jaden McDaniels based on those two games. I just, when I was putting down what to talk about with this, I feel like so much of the Jaden conversation, since the season ended, has been about the extension and what the value is of this, like, value proposition of the next 5 years, which kind of ignores the immediate question, which is who he was last season and who he can be this season.
Right.
And there is hopefully some sort of positive delta there, right? And improvement for this season. So I wanted to focus a little bit more on what we remember him doing last year, some of the numbers of what he did last season, and kind of talk about those through the context of this slightly new roster, slightly new, more mature.
I like that idea. Yeah. First of all, contract talk. Everybody's an expert until the truth comes out. And then like maybe 20% of the people knew what was going to happen. So, I mean, I don't like to talk about that stuff. And secondly, everybody will be shocked if Jaden McDaniels isn't on the team long-term. So, what the actual number is, I don't care,
I as the person who talks about it, I'm going to do a little pushback on that. It matters again for the big picture, right? If Jaden comes in at 5 or 8 million more than we thought it would be, that has an impact on the big economic picture for this team. Again, that's not what we're doing today when we're talking about previewing him and who he can be on this team for this season, when he's going to make like $4 million, right? That's right. Money is not even a factor here. I would just say, for me, in looking kind of like the refresh of my brain with the Wolves over the past month of getting ready for the season, when I've looked at stats, the two people who have really stood out as even better than I remembered, or had to remember how good statistically they were Mike Conley and Jaden McDaniels.
Absolutely. I agree on both.
And it's meaningful, right? Because it's like both for Mike and Jaden, like, we think of Jaden's main thing as like the defender, right? He's the strong point of attack defender, one of the best in the league. And we ignore the offense to some degree and how efficient and effective he was. Same with Mike, right? He's the quarterback of the offense, and you think about him as the mature sensei, right? As you always say.
Right.
But also, like, the numbers were really
the guy's a scorer, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they both were. They both were effective scorers. I mean, just going through some of this, just points per shot attempt last year for Jaden McDaniels. Of the 33 forwards who played 1,500 plus minutes, basically, like starting forwards, Jaden was 8th in points per shot attempt. That's just overall
Yep.
efficiency, 40% from three, which is seventh among those forwards, 59% from two. I think we forget that. I was like,
Yep.
oh my God, almost 60%. That was
Exactly.
second amongst those 33 forwards. The only one who was better was Aaron Gordon, who doesn't really play like
Gets
a forward.
bunnies all the time, right?
Yeah, right. It's more of like a center. And Jaden was 72% at the rim, fourth amongst those 33 forwards, only behind Aaron Gordon, Gordon Hayward, and Pascal Siakam.
Gordon Hayward, wow, that's weird.
Yeah. Gordon Hayward's still a good player. People don't know that.
I know, but at the rim, I just, I imagine him as a jump shooter, right?
I would like the thing you to be caught about that is that Jaden was the fourth best.
Right.
But we
well, when I prepared for the Finch interview, Jaden's stats stood out all over the place as well. I mean, he's and when I talked to Finch about it, I just said, how do you get this guy more usage? And Finch said, you don't. We talked about it, and you don't. You can't. There's too many guys who need to be fed in this lineup. And
I think you can in transition.
Yeah, that could be, although that's what you think about Ant. I mean, everybody should get fed in transition. And also, if he is going to be more of a rim protector this year when he's off the ball, then he's not going to be going down the floor as much. He's getting rebounds. So I don't know.
Started breaks himself.
No, I get it. I guess what I would say, as you asked to answer to your original question, what do I think when I think back to last season about is that role players, there's a couple of things they have to do. They have to sublimate their ego for the greater good of the team much more than anybody else. That's what makes them role players. That's why they're called role players. They're like character actors in a movie. They add spice, but if they add too much, it ruins the taste of the game. If they add too little, they are easily replaceable and diminish in value. So some of it is timing. Some of it is knowing when you need to contribute and in what way you are contributing. And that is what McDaniels made his biggest improvement on last year, in my opinion, is his usage went up 1%, but his impact on the offense went up much more than that. And that's because of his timing and his decision-making and his skills, quite frankly, but that fed into it. Even though his skills improved, his usage didn't go up incredibly, but when he was contributing and how he was contributing made the splash that wetter, And so that was a great sign for somebody who's 22, 23 years old. And what I will say about what I saw him this year, and everybody kind of thought this was going to happen last year. We had rumors, and now we had rumors again this year. But he's bigger. He clearly is bigger. When he, in the first quarter of the first game where he shot that fadeaway in traffic from like 10 feet, that can't be blocked.
Can't be guarded. Yeah.
I
mean, it's still to be determined if that's a good shot.
Oh, I know, but I mean,
but like there is value in being able to.
He can get over. He could shoot over people who are guarding him. Which
he said that at media day, right? Remember, he was like understanding where and when my shots can't be contested because he's like, I'm so big. He said something like that.
Yeah, and then of course, as a cutter, if you have if you're a flowing player who's cutting the basket and also 6'11", that's so there's a lot of.
I always want more strength from him on those though. Like it's like a risk strength. With the ball and like the ability to do it. But that with the getting bigger and getting older, like that's a reasonable thing I think to bake in. And if he's already shooting 72% at the rim, he's already shooting 60% on twos overall. If he can start kind of like taking a bump a little bit more and scoring, I mean, it's hard for the overall percentages to be much better than that could be, period.
Right.
But maybe with volume or against a better defender, he can, maintain some of that. Like, yeah, I mean, obviously it's the green arrow going up for him.
And one of the things that Finch also said was when we did ask him because of injuries or whatever to give us more at that end, he could. And so even though the usage is not expected to go up, the Wolves have more depth in the lineup just because of what he has added to his game. The old thing about when you bring somebody back, if you're getting an injured player back, that's like getting a new player. Well, if you're able to expand somebody's skill set, it's the same dynamic. If Jaden all of a sudden can flex to fill a void because somebody's injured, that's greater depth without adding players, And so I really see, bottom line, he's incredibly valuable because he is slotted into a spot where he is featured in his best skills and he knows how to contribute with his high-level subsidiary skills in a way that befits a good to great role player. And so that's how really, really good teams are made. That's how you get to host playoff games.
For sure.
And when you have that 3 through 7 on the roster that are really fucking good players, and Jaden is headed, that's where his trajectory is, I think.
And yeah, it just makes your shield bigger, right? As a team for a playoff series of areas that can't be exposed. What do you think he's going to shoot from 3 this year? Shot 39.8% last year.
37.6.
That'd still be good.
It would be good.
I wonder if there's a world where that could drop to like 33, 34.
Well, here's the thing. If he plays off ball a little bit more, then I do think that it's going to be an adjustment for him in terms of his spacing at both ends of the court, I think. And I also think that if and when, and it was kind of an anomaly because he was on the floor with Nikhil in that first game, and that was the only game he played.
Yeah.
So we don't really know what he'll be like when he and Ann are on the floor, which didn't happen because both were injured in the 2 succeeding games. So they haven't been on the floor together, and that will be interesting. It was gratifying to see him and Kat kind of get their mojo back.
Right.
I do think it's kind of like Nas slots in at the Cat spot and you don't have to change things. The fact that Nikhil can slot in the Jaden spot and you don't have to change a lot about what you do. And Nikhil is somebody who likes to shoot the 3. I think he's got confidence now. So I think Jaden will probably have it be a heavier percentage of a shot mix, just because they'll be used to that position, getting 3s out of that offense, and the offense will be more structured. Usually more structured offense means more open 3s if you're performing right.
Right.
So, but I think that increased volume usually knocks a couple of percentages off a player. I mean, if he can remain at near 40%, and increase his volume, holy shit,
Right. That's what I'm just thinking. And it's like I've always kind of thought his dynamic scoring place on the floor more so than shooting 3s would be using his size to finish at the basket. But he did both last year. So it's like to expect or to assume he can't, that's wrong. That's not a fair stance to take. I want to talk more about him in the context of Nikhil, because I think that really tweaks his position probably in a good way, offensively and defensively. But first, Britt, let's hit on Wolves Fest this Saturday. Britt and I will be at Falling Knife, Falling Knife Brewing Company in Northeast Minneapolis this Saturday. Wolves Fest starts at 4:00. We're gonna do a pod at 5:00. The Wolves play the Knicks at 6:30. We'll all watch that game together. I got a text from the owner today. They said they are going to have a special beer on tap for Wolves Fest. Their kind of one of their main beers is called Verbal Tip. This one's Verbal Tip Off.
All right.
So we're tweaking things. We're doing Wolves specific things. Hopefully maybe have some Wolves specific beers over the course of the year, which will be fun. Overall, we're just, grateful for Falling Knife to be a place, I think, to get people to gather. Britt and I like going there to hang out, and particularly when there's a game on, I think it's a fun way where even if you don't want to sit around and watch us talk for 45 minutes, come watch the game with a bunch of people. The Wolves are obviously back stateside playing the Knicks, so we will be there again this Saturday. Come at like 4:00, show at 5:00. Wolves game at 6:30. I'm really looking forward to it. Let's keep moving on, Jaden, Britt. Maybe flip over to the defensive side of the ball a little bit. I mean, I know we've kind of done the foul thing conversation, but if we're doing a preview of the wings, Jaden is the main wing on this roster. Right. And he has historical fouling issues.
Right.
And that I think we can believe this season will go down for two reasons. One, he's not going to need to be on the ball as much due to the presence of Nickeil Alexander-Walker. And then two, with some of that maturity and better understanding the game and understanding that like what these refs are calling on you, fair or not, like navigating that. It shouldn't be, 18 games into the season and we're like, man, it's been like 11 games where Jaden has had to come out multiple times for foul trouble.
That's actually a fairly accurate percentage. Right. I mean, it was incredible how often foul trouble really forced the Wolves to audible into a different thing, which is why, unlike many other people, especially in these parts, I wasn't outraged that he wasn't on the All-NBA defensive teams, because you have to show up. You have to be in the games. And there were a lot of games where he just couldn't get the burn. He couldn't get the minutes. And Finch thinks that a lot of it is emotional maturity. And if so, I'm not sure I agree as much as he says it, but, breaking your hand and missing the playoffs is like a big, signal message event that says you need to get your temper in order. You need to not be so competitive that you lose the forest for the trees. Don't let your man score on you if you have 3 fouls and they're relying on you to guard this man for the next 8 minutes. So I would love to see him play within himself a little bit more. I still think, because he is not a put your body on the guy, he's not a physical defender in the sense that he's bumping you off track with his physicality. He's far more of a
stopping you from where you're trying to go.
Stop being in your way, and also if you are gliding down, following you and waiting for you to commit before you do something. And it's a great strategy, except for the smarter foul drawers in the NBA that know to go into him at a certain time. He gets a lot of fouls from people who know how to make a foul look worse than it is. And because he's a shadower like that, there is a distance that the guy with the ball can make up and create the foul, create the contact. And so I think he loses out on more 50-50 calls than anybody, partly for that reason. I think he gets a bad whistle from the refs. I think his size, if he plays into his size, if he can be as lithe and coordinated as he was last year at 6'10 and a half, 6'11", man, again, there's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of reasons to think that he will be the second best player on the Timberwolves in 2 years.
Sure.
I think.
Well, and I think this year it's reasonable to, again, expect him to overall be a better defender, probably cross into that all defensive level of player, because I mean, we're listing off these reasons of his body type and his style and whatever of why he got the fouls. The reason he got a lot of fouls is because he guarded more pick and rolls than almost any other wing in the entire league. I was looking at it, just pick and roll possessions defended last season. Number one in the just volume. Drew Holiday defended the most.
It makes sense.
DeJounte Murray, the second most. Jaden McDaniels, the third most. And there's just this heavy volume of that. And then when I was going through the numbers, just some of the more counting numbers, he was third in the NBA in block rate for forwards of those forwards that played 1,500 minutes.
Right. That's that shadowing.
Well, that's that shadowing, but also don't you think his block rate, he's going to block more shots this year if he's also situationally playing off ball more?
Right.
Like I think a not all that bold, call would be to say Jaden leads wings in blocks this season. Blocks per game, blocks per 36, blocks per 100, because he was already way up there when he was guarding the ball as much as he was. I really think there is going to be some of those rotate over from the corner, a lot of those. He's going to be in that position more often. I think he can block a lot of shots in that, just using his length in that area. So I really think the defensive product overall should get better. And the only thing that would really hold it back is the fouling, which I think is reasonable to anticipate going down at least some.
Right. It's hard not to be bullish on what he can do at both ends of the court. In some ways, weirdly enough, though, everything went right for him last year, except for obviously the fouling didn't, but he played a lot. Yeah, I think he might have been like either second or third on the team in minutes. And he was able to flash his skills more when people went down. And so if given how the grind of what he plays, he's obviously very, very athletic naturally and skilled and is a gym rat. But if he gets hurt, again, that's obvious for everybody, but he's been remarkably injury free thus far, I think, he did have
while punching aside. Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
I want to do this while we go through these wings, but also some of the guards. I wish we would have done this with the bigs as well. I want you to guess, or also listeners to pause and guess who each player's best net rating partner was last year. Who do you think Jaden McDaniels' best net rating partner was last season? Of the seven players, players he played over 500 minutes with.
Okay, I know Rudy's in the mix. I don't know if he's up top, but he I think he was good with Rudy.
I don't think I would have got this.
Okay, well, I'm already. I can't see that, but
I know that's why I don't feel bad about putting it on the screen.
And okay, good.
No, that was the most minutes he played.
Oh, most minutes. I see.
His best partner was Kyle Anderson.
Ah, all right.
Which would maybe just be a guess for everyone, but
yeah, exactly.
Him and Ant plus 3.9, Jaden and Gobert plus 1.9, Jaden and D'Lo minus 0.6. His best one again was Kyle Anderson plus 6.1. Kat and Jaden were plus 2.7. Jaden and Conley were, I think that was his second best one, plus 4.5, and then Jaden and Naz Reid minus 0.4, which I think is all a good way of us to transition over to Kyle Anderson, because that's kind of who and what Kyle Anderson does is bring the most out of those he is surrounded by, or that's certainly what he did last season.
And if you think about the kind of players that get boosted by slow-mo, guys like Gobert and Jaden, guys who don't initiate on their own, require initiation. And that's what he does. He figures out, he's like he always says, I'm a point guard, and he speaks it into existence, you think, when he's doing it, rather than actually it's a fact. But I do think that he thinks on the floor like a point guard at all times, and is thus much more comfortable when it's his variation of point guard play. he is not a point guard that operates at the arc. He is a point guard that operates at the nail, at the foul line, in the center of the floor. And he's not a guy who makes long skip passes. He's a guy who makes the 10-foot pass that's the right
short,
pass.
small window type.
Exactly.
Late.
And also somebody who isn't overtly being like no look or omnidirectional, but knows how to make great feints one way and then a pass the other way. He's kind of like a quarterback that is often referred to as a game manager rather than a superstar, somebody who understands the system and doesn't get enough credit for the skill required to make the system hum. And that's what he does, I think, is he's extremely cerebral player and plays, gets his nickname honestly, plays with great deliberation. And for that reason is really good for players who, like I said, need that assist. Not only are they getting that assist, but he's telegraphing that assist and being able to pull it off anyway, which he doesn't ambush people that much, except with the fact that people forget exactly how good of a player he is. But what he's doing, you can kind of watch it unfold. And that's what makes him so much fun when he's on his game.
It was interesting when you were saying that, like the more traditional program. I'm like, yeah, he didn't run that much pick and roll, but he kind of did. I'm looking it up now. 245 possessions last season in 80 games of pick and roll, plus if you include the ones
but they were tight,
passed on. What did you say?
They were tight pick and roll. I mean, they were not perimeter pick and rolls that much, I don't think.
Yeah, maybe in like a lot of the little empty corner with Rudy, kind of more dribble handoffy types. You know, I'm just looking at it here. He ran 245, and there's 125 players who ran 245 pick and rolls last season. Relatively, over a point per possession on those, which is kind of middle of the pack, 1.016, middle of the pack for that. But yeah, he's more of the point guard in the sense of, we just want you to get us into our offense, or when our offense breaks down, can we find you to ping, find something, quick for them in the late shot clock.
What Finch seems to love about him is he's comfortable in improvisation, but in his improvisation, he is settling down his teammates. And that's a hard thing to do, to be improvisatory, to be able to be spontaneous and react, but at the same time, do it in a manner that doesn't create a lot of slapstick or a lot of, strain.
It requires being slow, man. That's what you're describing.
Right.
You can't do that if you're not slow. Everything you just said. Like moving literally slowly.
Right.
Slow, but I guess deliberate.
Yeah. And it really helps if you're, 6'9" with enormous arms and,
Totally.
he just, and he does have that. It's hard to believe that he's about to do what he's about to do, even in slow motion, because he looks kind of ponderous. He looks like somebody who looks that way shouldn't be, it's the Boris Diaw effect. I mean, there's a lot of guys.
It's the classic.
Who come to the NBA.
Why does this guy keep scoring on us and pick up?
Right, exactly. It is a playground game, right?
Yeah.
There's always one of those guys, that, when he was 14 was a point guard, and now he's like 38-year-old pot-bellied guy who still knows how to do all that stuff.
Exactly. I think when you look at Kyle's numbers from last season, the things that really stick out are how well he shot from three, and then how effective he was as a defender. The 3-point percentage up near 40% as well, after not having been, a shooter for a reliable shooter at all, really, in his career. Obviously, I think we could probably bake in a little bit of regression there. Defensively, though, and the impact he had, I mean, he in some of these metrics, he checks out as like 98th percentile.
And that is not the eye test I see. I really don't. Do you notice him being that impactful as a defender? I don't when he's on the court.
I think it's that they needed help in like filling gaps. I think he comes down on the ball really well, makes passes harder. Sorry, I shouldn't have said it was. It actually was 93rd percentile
So that's
as a
still
defender.
really,
But yeah, still really, really good. But he's had this his whole career, man. I guess I could throw this up on the screen as well. But he's been a really high level impact defender. So here, I mean, for those who are watching on the screen, this is defensive estimated plus minus. So you go back to his career, his rookie season, 52nd percentile, but then he's consistently been 86th percentile as a defender, 96th percentile in San Antonio, 96th percentile in San Antonio. Goes to Memphis, 91st defender, 83rd percentile defender, 91st percentile defender, 76th. And then he comes to Minnesota and he's 93rd. So, yes, like, I mean, to each their own on what they think about these metrics and how good they are. Personally, I'll just say that I think defensive estimated plus minus is the best catch-all individual metric that we have. Doesn't mean it's perfect. You'll find some random names on there still, but this is a statistical signal for analytic departments and things like that believe in the impact of this, that say he is consistently a player who straight up the opponents are scoring less against. They're shooting a lower percentage. You're generating more turnovers against. He's been that. So if I'm thinking one of the two regress, Kyle being a 93rd percentile defender or Kyle shooting 39% from three, I think the defense is more bankable.
Okay, but let's talk. I hope I'm not really derailing your chain of thought, but this is something that you brought up recently when we talked that it's stuck in my mind ever since. He is better at the 4 than he is at the 3, and that makes all kinds of sense to me.
Oh, yeah.
How does his game translate this coming season with Cat or Nas next to him almost all the time? Because those two guys theoretically are exactly the kind of guys that kind of get in his way, if you know what I mean, or
totally,
or are not complementary slow-mo players.
Absolutely. I think we have to touch on that again. And that was the difference. If you didn't listen to me and Britt before, that was the difference in Memphis. If you look last year, he played 89% of his minutes at power forward, was awesome. In Memphis the year before that, he played 82% of his minutes at power forward, was awesome. The year before that, 80% of his minutes at power forward, it was awesome. But you go back before that, the year before that, 19-20, or I guess 18-19, and he played 75% of his minutes at small forward, and they got crushed in those minutes. And he was significantly better at power forward. The same thing goes the first year. They kind of did the first 2 years in Memphis where they played him at a small forward more often than they did power forward. And just historically, his numbers have always been better at the 4. Now, he's a hard player to define positionally. And I think, some people kind of roll their eyes like, oh, what's a small forward versus a power forward? I'm with that broadly, but we know those teams well enough where we go, oh yeah, those Memphis teams, they played 2 bigs, like 2 traditional. It was Valanciunas and Jaren Jackson Jr. or Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson Jr., so when Kyle was playing, he was a small forward next to 2 traditional bigs. Same thing back in San Antonio next to, like LaMarcus Aldridge, Tim Duncan, David West. When he played small forward, it was next to 2 true bigs. Playing small forward on the Timberwolves is going to be like playing next to 2 true bigs, which he has historically done. The team has been less successful when he's doing it. Now there's different schemes, different systems. I wouldn't be shocked if, in 4 months from now, we're looking at net rating. And again, Kyle Anderson's all over the green in that way. But this is I think this is very reasonable to bring up as we're thinking about him making a relatively large positional shift this season. Now that Cat's back and that Nas is part of the mix, a more committed part of the mix.
And just on a macro level, if you want a slow-mo playmaker, you'd much rather have him at the 4 than at the 3. Slow-mo playmakers at the 3, that seems like, then you say to yourself, well, what's the 4 like? What's the 5 like if we're doing that? I mean, it just, I don't know. Both Cat and Nas seem to be really good at their own play creation, and really kind of use it to get themselves going. I mean, if you see both Cat and Nas, if they take somebody off the bounce and score on a layup, or basically do a crossover dribble, step back three, those are the kinds of plays that are in their wheelhouse, and those are the things that Slow-Mo, he can't help with that at all. He's a bystander like everyone else. And so, whereas if you have a guy like Jaden, as we, going full circle in terms of how much they play well together, or Rudy, the kinds of things that Slow-Mo does really benefit their game, because all the things that are difficult for them are removed, and they get fed into their natural skill set. Well, removing those things from guys like Nas and Cat kind of removes some of the tastiest things about their game that they like and that fans like. And so therefore it's an identity thing. And these are things that can be resolved and can be mitigated, but there is part of teamwork is making each other feel good. And that's, when Rudy was struggling like crazy, Slow-Mo would come into the game and make Rudy look like a coordinated human being again.
And make him feel good.
Exactly. That's my point. Is that when you have guys who are all of a sudden, all right, I'm not embarrassing myself out here on the court, in the end of the court I don't play well in, all of a sudden your play at both ends gets better. And that's going to be true for Cat and Nas, who need to shine on offense to keep that mojo on defense, where they're both much less competent. So it is this kind of weird chemistry thing that I worry about too.
It will be interesting to track. I mean, I found my eye going to that with Kyle at the three. I mentioned this a couple times, but they're really going with that gigantic lineup. And I think that's going to be a staple of this team this season, where you go with Rudy at the 5, Cat or Nas at the 4, Kyle at the 3. And what they were doing in preseason was Troy Brown at the 2 and Shake Milton at the 1 sometimes. And that's 6'6", 6'7", 6'9", 6'10", 7'1". Like they got a handful of different lineups that they can use in that way. And I wonder if in those lineups, maybe that's where Kyle can kind of profit, like the gigantic lineups. He's not out there with another true point guard. So maybe he's the point guard of that group.
Exactly.
And Shake and
I
Troy
think
Brown.
Fitch has that in mind, to be honest with you.
And he did bring it up. He was bringing the ball up in those situations in the preseason games. Like I think he views Shake as a point guard too, or an initiator, but maybe Kyle is higher in the dribble it up the floor pecking order, at least in that group. Ready to move on to Troy Brown?
Sure. One other thing I think I do want to say, though, is, or maybe just ask you rhetorically so we can get into it. Where do you think, is Slow-Mo going to get his crunch time minutes again? I think that's a really interesting question, because Finch has all kinds of faith in him, and he's on the final year of his contract. And you have Ann on the floor, you have Cat on the floor, you have Rudy on the floor. Obviously, Finch has talked about openly, sometimes one of those guys is going to be not on the floor. You're not going to play Cat Rudy on the floor against certain lineups. But Slow-Mo, he's got such faith in him, and Slow-Mo is invested in that time, and he's a good decision maker. I think it's a real variable. I think it might happen a lot, or it might not happen nearly as much.
I think the answer is opponent dependent, because, and I don't mean that totally as a cop-out. I mean that in a specific of, if you're not going to close with Rudy, then Kyle closes.
That's true.
I don't think I would be surprised at the frequency with which Cat and Nas close a game together at the 5 and 4, in which
I agree with that. I don't. That's you're giving.
I mean,
we're giving too much responsibility for people who are not responsibility adjacent.
Exactly. So, that's what I was saying. I don't think that's going to happen.
Right. I agree.
I think if you were to close with Kyle, maybe Jaden's fouled out, so he's at the 3 or something. But other than that, in a normal situation, I think it would be for Rudy, and then it would be Kat, Kyle, Jaden, Ant, Conley to close games situationally. Again, when it was an opponent, as was the case when they played like Dallas at the end of last season or Brooklyn at the end of last season, and Rudy didn't close games, a couple games. I think it would be that. I'm not mentally prepared for a Cat not closing a game situation yet, even though we know Rudy and Kyle works pretty well together they
do
pairing.
work really well together. I think if that were to happen, it would
one's going to be a political one. I would,
or Cat may take the decision out of controversy by being in late foul trouble, and then you say, when do you bring him back? Well, they're running well. Was going to bring him back, didn't bring him back because didn't have to, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I can foresee those kinds of games. But again, if Cat plays as well as he played in his 2 preseason games that you were resting a tiny amount of weight on, then by all means he's got to be there to finish. All right,
let's do the last thing with the Kyle Anderson. I forgot about this. Best net rating pairing last season.
Oh, that's tough. That is tough. I'm going to say Rudy again. I mean, he and Rudy really were good, but actually no, because Rudy was a net negative for the end. I was just thinking, I'm biased by who Rudy plays well with. Jaden McDaniels and Kyle Anderson were the 2 guys. So I'm going to say Conley.
No, it was Rudy, man. Kyle
was it Rudy? Okay.
Kyle and Rudy plus 7.1.
I thought myself.
Kyle and Ant plus 2.8. Kyle and Jaden plus 6.1. Kyle and D'Lo plus 3.5. Kyle and Mike Conley plus 1.7. Kyle and Naz Reid.
Yeah, that's right.
Minus 6.9.
I got to tell you, that's exactly why those guys have a different rhythm about them.
I don't disagree with that. And then Kyle Anderson and Taurean Prince also very good, plus 6.7. So
did Kyle ever get on the floor with Nas? Nah. Nickeil Alexander.
I mean,
Walker?
It might be a low amount of minutes. I'm scrolling here. Does not look like it was
okay.
Like it was
not
was very
statistically
much.
Significant.
Yeah, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, well, Kyle and Rudy.
Oh boy, only 197 minutes, but Kyle and Na minus 11.4.
Yeah,
really bad.
You know why? Because Na likes to. His decision making is idiosyncratic, and so it kind of messes up Slow-Mo's blueprint, I think, sometimes.
Mm-hmm. And that I think that's, if we were wrapping Kyle, like that's what it is. It's like right. There's a blueprint of players in which he plays best with and really gets the most out of. Right. And I think Finch is very in tune with what
that's is. Micah's whole job in some respects.
Micah Nora, yes. All right, let's just quickly rattle through Troy Brown, Josh Minott, Matt Ryan, and Jaylen Clark. I think we did get to see a decent amount of Troy Brown in the first 2 preseason games.
Played well, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, just this isn't a new take, but it's the Taurean Prince role. But it's the Taurean Prince role if it didn't have 16 minutes guaranteed a night within the rotation. It's the optionality to guard a bigger wing. Taurean Prince oftentimes would guard Luka Doncic once Jaden got in foul trouble, that type of player.
Right.
We saw that happen in the first preseason game. Troy Brown was guarding him. They left Nickeil on Kyrie or Jaden Hardy on the point guard there. Now Nickeil guarded Luka in the second game, but I think Troy Brown is in the mix there as a big wing to guard other big guard wings. We know about the shooting ability. I think there's a little bit of playmaking hope with him, as Finch has referenced a few times.
Right.
But the real thing I noted in watching those games, and I hadn't looked at the numbers, is the rebounding. I think he's going to be a good half court rebounder. He's 6'7".
Okay,
he's big. Yeah, we saw him in person at Media Day, but I saw him at that ping pong event too, and it was one of those. Yeah. That was like the first time I'd seen him in person in a way that I was thinking about it. I'm like, damn, that's a big dude. He's like, he's actually more of like the body type of like a small ball 4. You know, that like size wise it looks like, but which again, Taurean Prince. I think
right.
that's the comp here. But his numbers in terms of defensive rebounding, Troy Brown, particularly prior to his LA days, were all really good. The defensive rebounding rate numbers. So I think that's right up for all these bench guys who are on the fringe of the rotation or maybe just on the outside looking in. It's, can you help in one of the areas that we know is going to be a weakness or has historically been a weakness? And I would say those main things are right: 3-point shooting, defensive rebounding, and controlling the ball. Transition. Just minimizing turnovers. And I think Troy Brown, in theory,
checks a lot of those boxes
and is probably, you know, if it's 9 guys and he's 10 and J-Max 11, you know, he's probably one injury away from 15 minutes a night on this team.
I was impressed with, I mean, for lack of a better word, his composure. Yeah. He doesn't look like somebody who plays beyond himself.
LA's a great example of that last year. Just was super low usage, did exactly what a 5th guy would do on the floor when they're surrounded by
that is valuable.
LeBron.
I mean, not screwing things up is important, you know, and not breaking other teammates' rhythms. And I just think if I wasn't down on the Gobert trade, you know, for what happened last year, you know, I'm modifying away and I don't want to keep raising it, except I do want to put that out there as Tim Connelly has just done a great job. I mean, he didn't do a good job with Forbes and Austin Rivers last year, obviously. Yeah. But he's built a great roster. And
I would honestly even say like Forbes and Rivers was fine. Yeah. Rivers served a leadership purpose and Forbes played terribly, but only because they were so decimated by injury.
He couldn't shoot. I mean, who would have guessed that? You know, I mean, and
but there's a greater investment in Troy Brown. Troy Brown is making more money this season than Bryn Forbes and Austin Rivers combined last season. It's a heavier investment in the end of the bench role.
But it's just, I mean, the draft picks don't have to be pushed. They can develop at their own pace, and they all look promising, with the exception of Wendell Moore Jr., who actually looked pretty good in, like everybody else, overseas. But I just think that this roster is really deep and flexibly deep. You can run out almost any kind of quintet you want, and Troy Brown Jr. is definitely a part of that. I mean, I don't mind having this conversation while we're on his section, because he could play a little 1/2 in a pinch, you know, as like slow-mo's enabler.
It's a lot like slow-mo, like shake, like heel in a pinch. Yeah,
you're right. And he can play, I think, 2 to 4 on defense when he needs to, and he can play fast. I think he can play slow. He has the temperament to take a supporting role, be a 5th option, as you said. And I think that if you have a guy on the fringe of the rotation, I think he'll stay ready too. I mean, there's something about the way he operated at media day, and I'm watching him on the court. I think he's a professional, and
he totally gives up that bat. You know, he's only like just turned 24 this summer.
He's all the more reason, man. That's fabulous.
Yeah. He's a year younger than like Luka Garza. Like, you know, I mean, he's still relatively young in it. The one thing I had written down, and this is really not going off of anything, I don't know the answer to this. How physical is he?
That's a good point.
I want to, you know, because you do some of like the stereotyping of like,
right. Well, but again, we're going to go back to Taurean Prince. Taurean Prince was an enforcer, but he was not physical as a defender. You know,
I was watching the Lakers Warriors.
Did he punch somebody or
no? But he had 5 fouls. He had 5 fouls with 8 minutes left in the second quarter of the Lakers preseason game, and I'm like, I actually think TP is like a solid defender. I think he's going to be good for the Lakers. But that dude is like, if you are driving downhill at me, I am going to bump you. And I'm probably going, was like, I'd always be like, oh my God. Like that would happen a decent amount where Torian Prince would get.
And I wonder though, I mean, so much of his identity on the Timberwolves though is as a veteran leader, and all of a sudden you got LeBron on your team. You know, it's like this weird kind of, a lot of his thunder, non-basketball thunder is stolen. And I wonder if he's trying a little too hard to make up for it on the court, you know, as not being like the wise man in the locker room.
I think it'll be good there, man.
Oh, I think, you know, I hate to say it. I think the Lakers, you know, built a pretty good team. I think they're going to be good.
I do. And they hit on man, if like one, and I'm not banking on this, but it's like you got Christian Wood on a minimum, like Cam Reddish on a minimum. Can like any of those guys give you something? Whatever. We're not talking about the Lakers right now.
Yeah, LeBron can get them in line, you know.
Troy Brown's best net rating pairing on the Lakers last year. Any guesses?
I'm going to say Davis.
LeBron.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's okay. We'll get one of these. All right.
I'm going to be bad at those.
No, that is a hard. Hey, to be, I was like, wait, should I not look these up in advance and do it with him? Because I would have got.
No, that's okay.
Got Kyle and Rudy. You should have got that one. I'm a little disappointed.
Well, I mean, I did, and then I talked myself out of it right here on the air.
Josh Minott. Let's just rip through these last three guys kind of quickly. Really outside looking in. I mean, am I weird is it a weird feeling to feel like he's really dropped down the pecking order? And maybe we like falsely inflated him some. But
I think more the latter than the former. I think you talked to Kyle and more you talked to me. You know? Well, me and Kyle are really, really big. I like that player type anyway.
Yeah.
And
I still do.
One thing I will still say about that guy, he makes positive things happen when he's in the game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I should have clipped you guys back and forth at Media Day. That was so funny. Damn it.
But anyway, it's like
you were like, I love. It was like I love the chaos and all this. And Josh was like, well, I do think I could play actual basketball too. He laughed, but it was
right. But I got to tell you, I have less faith in that. And that's why I think with this more structure is one of the reasons why Josh Minott in Summer League did not help himself. Yeah. He played outside of his range, trying to impress people. And that's not a good thing for somebody who is trying to organically barge into the lineup. Yeah. You do that by reminding people why you're being talked about as being on the cusp of the lineup to begin with. And instead, he wanted to show people that he could be more of a playmaker, that he could do some fancy stuff, a little bit of a hot dog in him, a little bit of mustard in his game. Some of it's good. Some of it is not. But he is a great on-the-fly shot blocker, somebody who can create, he's a disruptor. And he's also somebody, when the game has been disrupted by him or somebody else, is a great pouncer. He knows how to pounce on opportunities. I think he is less good, and maybe some of it was playing. Him and Leonard Miller, I don't think are a great fit. That's a Leonard Miller. Leonard Miller will win that comparison battle on the court together, because Leonard Miller, I think, already has an older man's game than Josh Minott. Josh Minott has a young man's game, and if they do have a hair on fire lineup, he should be in it. And
I think that lineup is a couple years away,
if at all. Right?
Yeah. No, I just think in general the Wolves' style of play moves more towards that as the roster evolves to more Ant Jaden centric. I think for both Minott and Leonard Miller, their whole kind of what I'm thinking about them as is how do they fit into this 1 or 2 years from now, when I assume the style of play has probably changed some.
Well, and obviously where they fit in is when you cull the herd at the 4 and the 5. And that's when you begin to really see, or what you're doing is you're playing small and fiery. You're not playing big and deliberately. And I think we all, in the back of our minds, think that is going to come. At the same time, we know that this is the beginning of at least a 2-year process by which they become, if they're going to mushroom into like legitimate championship contending aspiration, then they need to let this current thing that's happening really marinate. And that means that those guys we are talking about are just going to have to wait,
And I think some of the maybe we expedite the waiting process with Minott specifically is, I think, moving him more into a wing role and outside of the deluge of bigs.
If he can defend. I mean, I don't know. Doesn't he strike you as the kind of guy who will get picked pretty easily?
Yeah, but I also think he's kind of like the type of length and athleticism that kind of does the weird sprawling off the pick and is weirdly back in place. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I don't know if he's gets buried by a pick guy. He's also a big dude for sure. Put on weight. I noticed that at media day. Also only 20 years old. So
he's got time to wait. That's right. He does have time to wait.
Gupta
special. And I do. I mean, I love, you can't teach opportunism. You can't teach freak athletic skill deployed with good timing. Those are things that's just somebody. On the other hand, if you're really good at that, it retards the development of other aspects of your game, because that's a part of your game that you kind of rely on. And that's what I was talking to him about at media day, where I said, he's really good playing in chaos and creating chaos. But I think it's still an open question as to whether or not you can play, if he was in a set offense. I just don't think,
that and that's what you're saying is if he plays or when he plays, it's more in the hair on fire group. That's how it starts. That's his initiation. It was the same with Jared Vanderbilt.
And Nas Reed, same way.
Yes. And that's just kind of a young player, big athlete type guy, get him in there and have them in time. And look how much Jared Vanderbilt and Nas Reed learned about defense and positioning,
exactly,
and rebounding.
And Minott is a smart guy, despite so all the goofy fun things about him. You forget, that. I mean, having
I just
Tim
hope
Connolly feed him for.
I think he's a very proud kid too, in a way that I mean as a compliment. And I hope he doesn't get like the Jaylen Noel, where it's 2 years in a row I'm not playing, 3 years, that sort of thing. I think that, in all seriousness, had a real impact on Jaylen Noel's development as a player. And obviously that's just a Wolves example that happens all around the NBA. But I think the thing with Minott is he is 20 years old. Makes sense to get him a lot of reps in the G again this year and do all that. Whereas Jaylen, his second year was 23, maybe. It's just it's a little bit different.
He didn't benefit from the Gupta contract.
No,
he thought, wait a minute now, I signed something. He had Sam Cassell disease. He'd signed something and almost immediately regretted it.
Sam Vassell. We're not even gonna. We can all put together how that works.
He always signed a contract. And
Cassell. I thought we were doing Devin Vassell and Sam Vassell.
Oh no!
You're
Sam
Cassell. I messed that one up.
That's all right. Sam Cassell. Forever. He in fact he'd transfer his angst over his signing a bad contract and arguing for better contracts for his teammates.
Right.
Saying management screws it, Well, wait a minute, you just signed a contract with him last year. Nobody held a gun to your head. He was comical that way. Anyway, I don't know.
I think we got Minott
with that.
No, I think
we've done Minott, right.
Just quickly on Matt Ryan and Jaylen Clark, as I put them in this group too. I've always kind of had this hope with Matt Ryan, like a reasonable amount of hope as a two-way guy, that he could evolve kind of into that Taurean Prince Troy Brown type role thing we're talking about, a bigger wing, smart, knows where to be defensively, and then just shoots the shit out of it. Like that's the hope.
Right.
I do have to say, and I know it's garbage time in a preseason game, but that was a pretty horrific stretch of Matt Ryan play in Abu Dhabi. But I only bring that up to say that's the only time we've seen him play anytime recently.
And I don't mean to be cruel, but he's destined to be a footnote in Timberwolves lore. I mean, that Matt Ryan is not going to be ascending beyond the 12th man role or the 10th man role. I mean, pick your garbage time guy,
It's interesting though. So if that's true, and I think I would lean that direction, it's interesting to give him one of the two ways rather than like throwing a two-way at a 20-year-old or a 21-year-old or something like that who has more expectation for upside. And I think to kind of rhetorically answer my own question, I think he's on that as like a, been around continuity culture type
locker
of guy.
room ballast, and all these guys spend much more time on the plane and getting to the bus to the plane and dressing in the locker room.
And I think he's tight with a lot of the guys. Like he's tight with Luka, which makes sense. They both played for the Iowa Wolves, but I always thought him and Rudy were really seemed to be.
Yeah, there you go. Well, I mean, if that's true, Rudy, it isn't that Rudy is a bad guy or unpopular guy, but there seemed to be a generational difference beyond their years. Rudy always felt like the stepfather in that locker room,
Mm-hmm.
And so if you have a stepchild that really gravitates to him and they,
Yeah. I mean, and I'm not in these guys' personal lives or anything. I've always just kind of noticed, I'm like, oh, wow, Matt Ryan and Rudy Gobert seem to talk and hang out.
Making Rudy feel comfortable is better than most 12 men can do.
That's
so.
Right. To we're very bottom of the roster, which is not a slight on Jaylen Clark. Right. He just has a torn Achilles.
Yeah.
I put him in this group as well. It totally, if he was healthy, one of the guys I'd be kind of excited to watch him play in preseason a little bit and just to kind of actually watch, what he looks like and also be able to track a little bit of where he's at physically coming off of the Achilles injury. But he's not going to play. I'm not sure he even plays at all in the G League all season. This might just be a red shirt year or whatever for him. But I like the kid's vibe. I'll say that. I like every time we've talked to him.
We had 2 extended conversations with him thus far.
Yeah.
And at his media unveiling when he was a draft pick on stage,
loved it.
He was a junkyard dog.
Yeah.
I mean, show me a wall, I'll run through it, et cetera, et cetera. Media day, he was an Eagle Scout. I want to do good things for other people. It's like this crazy, 2 really impressive in their own way, self-contained identities that he flashed in 2 different.
And neither really seemed fake.
No, I don't think he is fake. I think he's.
I've heard plenty of Eagle Scout.
Oh yeah. Well, let's face it, we've had some.
But it was
some quintessential fake Eagle Scouts.
Yes.
But I really do think that we can't see him play. So all we can do is size him up in terms of what comes out of his mouth. And he's delivering. And he's been a fantastic
10 out of 10.
He's given you preferences into, he's a versatile talker.
and hopefully that versatility translates on to.
Well, give me the junkyard dog over the Eagle Scout.
I was gonna say, man, I don't know. He seems like your type minus the Eagle Scouting, but And I didn't watch a ton of them, but after they drafted him, the junkyard dog is
clips get you hard to not get excited about that. He reminds me of Eric Bledsoe on steroids,
Eric Bledsoe, I like that. Well, yeah, he's your Okogie mold.
Yeah, well, there you go. Right, if he can shoot. Okogie, anytime you mention the word Okogie,
I said Okogie
he won't be a Timberwolf for long. Yeah.
Well, he's the 52nd overall pick. Odds are he won't. But what he said at his introductory press conference, if I don't work in the NBA, it won't be because I didn't do everything I could to do it. And like the way where you believed it, I was like,
oh yeah.
I was like, all right, Jaylen Clark.
Exactly. You got to pull for him.
You do.
He's one of those guys that. If he has a game where he gets 4 steals, 3 points, and 4 rebounds, and basically shuts down a guy, the post-game interview will be glorious.
Right. We'll be ready.
All kinds of people will be cited, and it'll be wonderful.
All right, that is our Wings preview. Again, if you want something similar, we did this last week with the bigs. I think if I have a list of it here somewhere of who our guards are, I guess we could probably do this off the top of our head. Next week we'll do Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Shake Milton. Who else am I missing in there? That's a guard that we haven't done yet. J-Mac. There we go. So we will do that again next week. We'll have also another Wolves game to talk about. I guess also Britt and I will be doing a pod on Saturday at Falling Knife as well. And for that, we'll take a bunch of your guys' questions there. We'll have a third mic. People can come up and ask questions. I think that's always the most fun there. So, if me and Britt have been, or Britt specifically, I hope there's nothing that I've been missing, because I've been doing daily podcasts in the middle of the preseason. So if there's something that I somehow have missed, or that we haven't got to with Britt, come to Falling Knife, ask those
or if
questions.
something we've said, provokes a follow-up, is,
Exactly.
All you have to do is remind us of what we were saying, because we
won't remember.
I forget as soon as I.
No, dude, I'm doing 4 or 5 times as many of these. I don't remember either.
Right.
Let's you and I, we're gonna go to practice now. Are you gonna go to practice?
Nope. I got my sister here in town.
Okay, there you go. Well, I'm gonna head over there now. I will be back with Jace tomorrow, probably, to talk about what we hear today from Kat or Ant or Finch or whoever it is we do talk to. So that'll be coming up. But Britt, appreciate you doing it. You guys can follow Britt on Twitter at Britt Robson. You can meet him at Falling Knife this weekend. Come through 4 p.m. October 14th, live show at 5. Watch the Wolves game at 6:30. Until tomorrow with Jace, he's Britt. I'm Dane. Peace out. How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah.